The hum of the lavish ballroom at the Drake wasn't just music, it was the thrum of my entire world. Orchestrated perfectly for Gregory, tonight was his pinnacle. A promotion to senior vice president, the culmination of years of relentless work, our shared sacrifices. My hand instinctively smoothed the rich silk of my custom-made, emerald green gown. A dress I'd commissioned months ago. A secret celebration of our time's journey. Our time's success. It shimmered under the chandeliers. A silent testament to the countless late nights, the deferred dreams, the unwavering belief I'd poured into him. I remembered the tailor's meticulous fittings, the way Gregory's eyes had lit up when he first saw me in it, promising me this night, and countless others, would be ours. My heart swelled with a pride so profound it almost hurt, a bittersweet echo of how far we'd come from our tiny first apartment to this glittering Chicago skyline. My gaze swept the elegant crowd, searching for him amidst the congratulations and clinking glasses. He was the center of attention, as always, his charisma drawing people in like moths to a flame, and then I saw them. Not him alone, but times them asterisk. My husband, Gregory, his arm casually, intimately, around a woman's waist. A woman whose silhouette was eerily familiar. The world seemed to slow, the orchestral music fading to a distant drone as my eyes narrowed, focusing. The dress? It was my time's dress. The emerald green silk, the intricate beading, the subtle cut that flattered my figure perfectly. Except it wasn't on me, it was on Amber, my younger stepsister. Her head tilted back, laughing into Gregory's eyes. A private joke shared between them that stole the air from my lungs. Her fingers adorned with a ring I recognized as a gift from Gregory. One he'd claimed was just a corporate token. Toyed with the lapel of his expensive suit. The way he looked at her, the softness in his gaze, the possessive grip of his hand. It wasn't the look of a man talking business with a colleague, let alone a family member. It was the look of a lover. A silent scream ripped through the cavern of my chest, unheard by anyone in the bustling room. The polished marble floor beneath me felt like it had crumbled into dust. The vibrant emerald of my time's gown, now a mocking, blinding mockery of everything I thought I knew. The dazzling lights of the gala transformed into a cruel spotlight, illuminating the brutal, undeniable truth. My world, meticulously built on loyalty and love, had just shattered into irreparable fragments, right there, in the heart of our supposed triumph. The shattering didn't make a sound, not one that anyone else could hear, but the silence inside me was deafening. A vacuum where joy and trust once lived. My limbs felt cemented to the polished marble, the opulent room spinning around me even as I remained frozen. Gregory, Amber, their intertwined hands, the mocking shimmer of my time's dress. They were a tableau of betrayal, seared into my retina. For a breath, maybe two, I was suspended, an observer of my own demise. Then, a strange, cold clarity pierced through the haze of agony. It wasn't a sudden fury, but a precise, surgical chill that settled deep within my bones. The pain was still there, a raw, searing wound, but beneath it, something hardened, coalesced. It was a resolve so sharp, so absolute, that it felt like a new, unfamiliar organ growing within my chest. This wasn't the end of me. It was the end of him, and it would start now. With a resolve I didn't know I possessed, I began to walk. My custom-made heels clicked softly on the marble, each step a deliberate hammer blow against the fragile facade of my life. A silent drumbeat of defiance. The short distance across the ballroom felt like an endless journey, yet I moved with an almost ethereal grace. My gaze fixed on the two figures who had unwittingly become the architects of their own ruin. As I drew closer, the subtle hum of conversations began to falter. Eyes turning, a ripple of silent curiosity preceding my arrival. Gregory's smile, fixed on Amber, faltered as he finally registered my presence. His eyes, usually so confident, widened fractionally. A flash of fear before confusion settled in. Amber, still draped possessively around him, followed his gaze. Her flirty giggle died in her throat as she saw my face, an expression of triumph quickly replaced by a pathetic, feigned innocence. She straightened, pulling away from Gregory with a jerky movement, as if my presence alone had rendered their intimacy obscene. My hand, steady despite the tremor in my soul, found the slim, ivory envelope tucked into my clutch. It wasn't divorce papers exactly, but a retainer agreement with Catherine Davies, the most formidable divorce attorney in Chicago, drafted weeks ago when a tiny, persistent doubt about Gregory had first begun to nag at me. A premonition, I now realized. A desperate measure I'd never truly believed I'd need to enact. Gregory. My voice was a low murmur, barely audible over the sudden oppressive silence that had descended upon their immediate vicinity. Even the clinking of champagne glasses seemed to have ceased. I extended my arm, holding the crisp white envelope before him. It was a silent challenge, a public declaration witnessed by Tom from legal, Beatrice from marketing, and Mr. Henderson, a key board member, all of whom stood unnaturally still, their faces a canvas of dawning comprehension. His hand, hesitant, took it. His brow furrowed as he saw the name, Catherine Davies, emblazoned on the corner. Then, understanding, cold and absolute, dawned in his eyes, leaching the color from his face. His jaw went slack. Amber gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes darting frantically between Gregory and me. Her feigned innocence collapsing into genuine horrified shock. She looked at the envelope, at Gregory, then back at me, her expression a mix of terror and disbelief, as if she'd just realized the true cost of her petty theft. I didn't wait for a response, didn't utter another word. My purpose was served. I turned, my emerald gown shimmering with a defiance it hadn't held moments before, a beacon of my shattered pride. Every step away from them was a step towards my freedom, my back straight, my head held high. The silence in the ballroom was profound now, broken only by the sharp, stunned whispers that erupted in my wake. I could feel the weight of countless eyes, the speculation, the judgment, but more importantly, the irreversible crack in Gregory's carefully constructed image. He had won his promotion, but I had just signed his downfall. My exit wasn't an escape, it was a detonation, and as I walked away, leaving him and Amber marooned in the wreckage of his public humiliation, I knew this was just the very first spark. The crisp Chicago night air, usually a welcome balm, felt like a physical blow against my tear-streaked face as I burst out of the Drake's grand entrance. The valet, accustomed to polite requests, looked surprised as I snatched my keys and fled, leaving a hasty instruction to forward my car to Sophia's. The limousine I'd arrived in with Gregory, the one that should have carried us home in triumph, now felt like a gilded cage. I hailed the first available taxi, muttering Midway Airport as a temporary distraction, needing only to put distance between myself and that glittering mausoleum of my marriage. The cab's anonymous interior offered a strange kind of solace, a buffer against the gaping wound that had just been carved into my soul. The adrenaline that had propelled me through the ballroom, fueled my public defiance, now began to recede, replaced by a seismic tremor of raw, visceral pain. Grief, sharp and sudden, clawed at my throat. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the cruel realization that years of unwavering dedication, of dreams meticulously woven, had been systematically unraveled by the very man I had built them with. Each shimmering sequin on my Times dress, now gracing Amber, felt like a splinter in my heart. But even through the blinding haze of heartbreak, a single unwavering thought cut through the chaos. Mia. My daughter. She was the one fragile piece of my shattered world that I had to protect. To shield from the fallout of this grotesque spectacle, I pulled out my phone, my fingers trembling as I dialed Sophia. "Soph, it's me. I need you." I choked out, the words barely a whisper. "Lorraine? What's wrong? You sound—" "I saw him. With Amber." At the gala. In times my time's dress. The torrent of words poured out, punctuated by gasps for air. I gave him the papers. The ones for Catherine. I need to get Mia. She's with Mrs. Peterson. Can she stay with you tonight? Just until I figure things out? Sophia didn't hesitate. Of course, darling. Bring her here. I'm already home. And Lorraine? Honey? I'm so sorry. I always knew there was something off about him. And that stepsister of yours? She always had shifty eyes. I should have said something sooner. Her voice, warm and laced with indignation, was a lifeline. Just get here. I'll make up the guest room. We'll get through this, you and Mia. The taxi veered towards Sophia's apartment building. Not midway. A silent testament to my friend's steady influence. Once inside her familiar comforting space, the dam finally broke. I collapsed onto her sofa, tears streaming down my face. The silent scream from the ballroom now finding its voice in ragged sobs. Sophia held me, stroking my hair, letting me unravel. The grief was oceanic, pulling me under. Mourning not just the man I thought Gregory was, but the future I had envisioned. The family unit I had so fiercely protected. Anger followed, a hot, pulsating rage at their audacity. Their callous disregard for our shared history. For Mia, the dawning realization of the betrayal's depth hit me with the force of a physical blow. It wasn't just a fleeting mistake. It was a calculated, long-term deception, hidden behind a veneer of corporate ambition and loving husband. How many times had they laughed at my expense? How many late nights at the office were spent in Amber's arms? But amidst the raw pain and fury, something else began to stir within me. It was quiet, insidious, but undeniably present. The steely resolve that had briefly taken hold in the ballroom. Sophia's words, her unwavering belief in me, echoed in my ears. This wasn't the end of my story. This wasn't a defeat. This was a turning point. A strategic pivot. The tears still flowed. But beneath them, a quiet, cold determination hardened. Gregory thought he had destroyed me. He had only succeeded in setting me free, and inadvertently, had armed me with a purpose far more formidable than he could ever comprehend. The chessboard, as Sophia used to say, was just being reset, and this time, I would be playing for keeps. That cold determination, which had first surfaced amidst the chaos of the gala, now solidified into a singular, unwavering purpose. As dawn tentatively painted Sophia's apartment in muted hues, sleep had offered no comfort, only the relentless playback of Gregory and Amber's intertwined betrayal. But with it came a chilling clarity. The first move on this reset chessboard began before the city truly stirred. My phone, still clutched in my hand, was already dialing. Catherine Davies answered on the second ring, her voice surprisingly crisp for the early hour. Lorraine, I figured you'd be calling. Gregory mentioned he received a package. Consider our agreement officially activated. Tell me everything. Her calm, professional tone was a balm, a steady hand guiding me through the swirling emotional wreckage. Hours melted into a blur of calls and instructions, while Sophia, bless her heart, tiptoed around with coffee and silent support. I systematically began to dismantle the financial scaffolding Gregory had taken for granted. My first priority was Mia. I initiated a transfer to a new, secure account solely in my name, ensuring immediate liquidity for her needs. Then, with Catherine's immediate guidance, I moved to freeze all joint accounts, securing our shared savings and investments from any desperate moves Gregory might attempt. The process felt surgical. Each click, each confirmation, a precise blow against his perceived control. I compiled a meticulous list of every asset, every property, every investment we owned, documenting everything with the detached efficiency of a corporate auditor. This wasn't about vengeance alone. It was about ensuring Mia's future, about rebuilding from a foundation he thought he owned. The marital home, that gilded cage, became a necessary target. Sophia had insisted Mia stay with her, shielding her from the initial chaos. I drove back, not with dread, but with a cold sense of mission. It felt alien, devoid of the warmth I had poured into it. I packed only essentials for Mia and myself: clothes, cherished toys, important documents. Each item I placed in the boxes felt like severing another tie, but also like reclaiming a piece of myself. The house was no longer a home. It was a battleground from which I was strategically retreating, leaving behind only what I was prepared to fight for in court. Sophia's guest room, simple and welcoming, became our temporary sanctuary, a place where Mia could feel safe and loved, away from the shadow of her father's deceit. By the end of the day, Catherine's office had drafted and dispatched the initial legal letters. They weren't just divorce papers. They were a declaration of war, meticulously outlining my intent to pursue a fair and comprehensive settlement, citing infidelity and marital misconduct as grounds. The formal proceedings had begun, legally solidifying the public confrontation from the previous night. I imagined the look on Gregory's face when he received them. The cold, stark reality of his choices, staring back at him from legal parchment. The despair of the night before had not vanished entirely, but it had receded, replaced by a potent cocktail of fierce protectiveness for Mia, and an almost exhilarating sense of purpose. This wasn't a reactive lashing out. It was a systematic, strategic dismantling. I sat down with Catherine, a legal pad spread before us, and together, we began to outline the multi-pronged attack. Every vulnerability Gregory possessed, his reputation, his professional network, his inflated ego, even his dubious business practices, would be examined, catalogued, and, when the time was right, exploited. The tears had stopped. The pain was still a dull ache, but it was now a catalyst. Gregory had thought he was a chess master, but he had underestimated the quiet woman who had always been content to play the queen. Now, the game truly began, and I was holding all the power. The game indeed began, not with a roar, but with the calculated whine of a man desperate to control his crumbling narrative. Gregory's first public move came swiftly, though not unexpectedly. His carefully curated LinkedIn profile, usually a bastion of corporate jargon and self-congratulation, transformed overnight into a soapbox of manufactured anguish. I saw it first on Sophia's tablet, sipping the cooling herbal tea she'd made. A notification popped up. Gregory Thorne has posted an update. My stomach clenched, but the icy calm from the gala remained. He had written a lengthy, meticulously crafted post, brimming with the kind of corporate platitudes he usually reserved for quarterly reports, now twisted to elicit sympathy. "It is with a heavy heart," his post began, "that I must address the recent, deeply personal challenges my family and I are enduring. The path to success is often fraught with unforeseen obstacles, and while I dedicate my life to innovation and leadership at company name, I am unfortunately navigating a complex private matter that has been unjustly brought into the public eye." He continued, weaving a narrative of a devoted husband and father, blindsided by an unfortunate misunderstanding, hinting at an unreasonable reaction from a loved one. The accompanying photo was a black and white, somber headshot, his brow furrowed in what he likely intended to be pensive sorrow, but which to my eyes, now sharpened by betrayal, looked like pure self-pity. He ended with a plea for privacy and understanding, promising to redouble his focus on his professional duties, subtly implying that Times was the true victim, his career unfairly threatened by domestic chaos. The comments section was a battlefield. His sycophantic colleagues and industry acquaintances rushed to his defense. "Stay strong, Gregory, we stand with you. Don't let personal attacks derail your brilliant vision." There were heart emojis and supportive platitudes aplenty. But amidst the noise, a different current ran. "Unjustly brought into the public eye? Isn't that usually what happens when you make a scene at your own gala?" One anonymous account dared to comment, quickly deleted, but not before I saw it. Others were more subtle, questioning the timing, the tone. "A bit much for LinkedIn, isn't it?" Another read, "Perhaps some matters are best kept truly private." The hashtag #StandWithGregory had begun to trend among his defenders, a stark contrast to the burgeoning whispers of "lights on Gregory" I knew were still simmering. I forwarded the screenshot to Catherine Davies immediately. Her response was swift and unequivocal. "Do not engage, Lorraine. Not directly, not indirectly. Let him dig his own grave. This plays right into our strategy. His attempt at damage control is transparent. We have the facts, he has performative emotion. Guess which one wins in court?" Her advice resonated with my own hardening resolve. My fight wouldn't be waged in the comments section. It would be meticulously executed behind the scenes. Legal document by legal document. Revelation by revelation. While Gregory spun his web of deceit online, I watched, not just his public posts, but the subtle ripples he couldn't control. My carefully cultivated network, built over years of supporting Gregory's career, started feeding me whispers. A major investor meeting scheduled for next week was postponed indefinitely. A key partnership deal, once considered a certainty, was now under review. A fractional dip in the company's stock, tiny enough to be attributed to market fluctuations, was a tremor only I could truly feel. These were the first cracks, almost imperceptible to the casual observer, certainly to Gregory himself. Blinded by his own self-importance, he believed his carefully constructed facade of victimhood would hold, that his charisma and professional standing would weather any storm. He hadn't yet grasped that the foundations of his empire were built on sand, and I had just unleashed the tide. He was playing chess, but I was already several moves ahead, orchestrating a cascade of consequences he couldn't possibly foresee. His plea for sympathy was merely prologue to the symphony of his undoing. The symphony, as I had grimly predicted, demanded a conductor. Gregory's self-serving lament on LinkedIn had been a clumsy overture, a discordant note to anyone truly listening. My silence, however, was not inaction. It was the strategic pause before the first, carefully placed instruments began to play. Catherine's advice, not to engage directly, was not merely restraint. It was the foundation of a deeper, more insidious strategy. We wouldn't counter his emotional theatrics with our own. We would counter them with facts, cold, unyielding, and utterly devastating. My network, painstakingly cultivated over years as Gregory's supportive partner, suddenly became a formidable weapon. I wasn't reaching out directly, of course. My calls were to former colleagues in finance, discreet messages to journalists I'd met at charity galas, contacts who, like me, had seen Gregory's slick veneer and perhaps harbored their own unspoken doubts. The information I fed them wasn't raw gossip. It was meticulously compiled data. A subtle discrepancy in quarterly earnings reports I'd once helped him compile, now re-examined through a critical lens. An email chain I'd accidentally stumbled upon years ago, detailing an aggressive, arguably unethical, acquisition strategy that bordered on corporate espionage, whispers about inflated projected growth figures to entice unsuspecting investors. These were not accusations, merely food for thought, curious observations that seemed to contradict Gregory's public persona of unimpeachable integrity. The impact wasn't immediate, but it was undeniable. The first tremors were felt on industry forums, then specialized tech blogs. An anonymous post detailing concerning patterns in executive compensation versus actual company performance gained traction. Another, from a supposedly disgruntled former employee, alluded to a culture of cutting corners and leveraging personal connections for undue advantage. The pieces were disparate, seemingly unconnected at first glance. But for anyone looking for the truth, the dots were beginning to connect. Then, the hashtag appeared. Lights on Gregory. Not from me, not directly. It was a grassroots movement, fueled by the very facts I had discreetly circulated. It started small, a few skeptical voices, but rapidly gained momentum, transforming from a subtle counterpoint to Gregory's self-pity into a blazing spotlight on his hypocrisy. People began to share screenshots of his LinkedIn post next to links to these anonymous articles, highlighting the stark contrast. Pray for privacy, but boast on LinkedIn, number lights on Gregory. Says he's focused on work, but company financials look interesting. Number lights on Gregory. It became a rallying cry for those tired of performative victimhood. The narrative also began to peel back the layers of Amber's own carefully constructed innocence. It wasn't just Gregory who had skeletons in his closet. Sophia, with her keen eye for human nature and an uncanny ability to unearth digital dirt, had been quietly doing her own digging. She found old articles from a lesser-known society gossip blog, documenting Amber's previous relationships, always with men of significant wealth or power, always ending abruptly when their fortunes waned or their attention shifted. There were whispers of a minor embezzlement scandal at a previous nonprofit where Amber had volunteered, quietly hushed up by a powerful board member. Her pattern of opportunistic attachments and a history of financially motivated relationships became disturbingly clear. "She's not just a home wrecker, Lorraine," Sophia had stated, her voice tight with disgust. "She's a parasite. And Gregory was just her next host." These revelations, also subtly seeded into the digital ether, painted Amber not as a naive victim caught in a love triangle, but as a calculated player in a much larger game. The effect on Gregory's professional network was palpable. The initial rush of "Stand with Gregory" posts dwindled. The supportive comments morphed into awkward silences. I started receiving cautious, almost apologetic messages from former acquaintances, ostensibly checking in on me, but subtly fishing for information, their words laced with thinly veiled concern about Gregory's situational ethics. Board members, who had initially dismissed the gala incident as a private domestic dispute, were now quietly requesting confidential reports from the finance department. Their smiles tightening, their posture stiffening, the whispers in the corridors of power were no longer about my supposed overreaction, but about Gregory's integrity, his judgment, his very fitness to lead. Every step was calculated, every piece of information precisely targeted. I didn't need to yell, I didn't need to cry, I simply needed to reveal the truth. Stripped of Gregory's self-serving narrative and Amber's deceptive charm, was a weapon far more potent than any emotional outburst. And it was just beginning to cut deep. The cutting began not with a splash, but with the steady drip of bad news that no amount of spin could staunch. My morning routine, now anchored by Sophia's robust coffee and financial news feeds, brought the first official reports. The headlines, once celebrating Gregory's meteoric rise, now hinted at turbulence. Thorn Innovations facing headwinds amidst executive scandal. Read one from a prominent business journal. Another, more pointedly, asked, "Is Gregory Thorne's personal life threatening his company's future?" Investor confidence, a delicate ecosystem built on perception and promise, began to wither. I learned through my channels that a major institutional investor, pivotal to their upcoming Series C funding round, had quietly withdrawn their commitment, citing unforeseen reputational risks. One key client, a long-standing partner that brought in a significant percentage of Thorn Innovations' revenue, announced they were reevaluating their contract due to recent developments that do not align with our brand values. It was a death by 1,000 cuts, each one precisely aimed. The tremors weren't just external. The walls of Thorn Innovations, once buzzing with the vibrant energy of a burgeoning startup, began to crack from within. Disgruntled employees, already unsettled by the relentless number lights on Gregory hashtag, became openly vocal. Anonymous posts on Glassdoor and internal message boards, quickly forwarded to me by a sympathetic contact, detailed a growing resentment towards Gregory's leadership. "He's more focused on saving face than saving the company," one read. "Morale is at an all-time low. The vision is lost." The most damning sign came when several key talents, lead engineers, innovative designers Gregory had once poached with promises of grandeur, tendered their resignations. They cited philosophical differences and a toxic work environment. But everyone knew the real reason. They saw the writing on the wall. Gregory's empire was no longer a ship worth sailing. The combined effect was devastating. The company's valuation, once soaring towards a unicorn status, plummeted with alarming speed. The much-anticipated IPO, which Gregory had touted as his crowning achievement, the very reason for the gala where our world had fractured, was now in serious jeopardy. Analysts downgraded their forecasts. Investment banks distanced themselves. The dream of Thorne Innovations conquering the tech world was dissolving into a nightmare of impending bankruptcy. Catherine Davies, in her typically understated way, informed me that the financial projections for the company were now catastrophic, making our case for asset division even stronger. Gregory, however, remained in a state of furious denial. His attempts to salvage his business were a frantic, desperate spectacle. I heard reports, both direct and indirect, of his escalating temper in board meetings, his verbal lashings at anyone who dared to question his judgment. He fired several longtime employees he deemed disloyal or negative, further alienating those who might have once stood by him. He embarked on a whirlwind tour of emergency investor meetings, his presentations becoming increasingly erratic and aggressive. He tried to discredit the negative press, blaming me, blaming competitors, blaming anyone but himself. His charisma, once his greatest asset, now came across as a hollow, desperate performance. He was shedding allies like leaves in a storm, convinced that everyone else was conspiring against him. From my quiet vantage point in Sophia's spare room, with Mia safely at school, I watched it all unfold. Each news report, each whispered rumor, each dip in the stock market, was a confirmation. It wasn't just a divorce anymore. It was the calculated destruction of a man's entire carefully constructed world. The empire Gregory had built on ambition and deceit was crumbling, brick by brick, under the weight of his own hubris. And I, Lorraine, the quiet wife he had so carelessly discarded, was merely observing the consequences of his choices, seeing the calculated devastation of his empire unfold exactly as I had planned. His world was being methodically dismantled, brick by painful brick, preparing for the full, undeniable exposure of its rotten core. As Gregory's carefully constructed world was swept clean, the thoroughness of that dismantling began to reveal stains I hadn't even known existed. A deeper, a more repulsive layer beneath the surface of his meticulously crafted life. It was Catherine, her voice clipped and devoid of emotion, who delivered the news. The kind of news that, even after everything, still had the power to shock. "Lorraine," she began, her tone a stark contrast to the chaos swirling around Gregory. "Our investigators have uncovered another party, a Miss Eleanor Vance. Apparently, she believed she was in a serious, exclusive relationship with Gregory for the past 18 months. A separate apartment, monthly allowances, promises of a future once his difficult marriage was over." My grip tightened on the phone, knuckles white. 18 months. This wasn't a recent transgression or a drunken mistake at the gala. This was a parallel life, meticulously maintained, running concurrently with his deception of me and of Amber. The sheer audacity, the depth of his pathological dishonesty, was breathtaking. It wasn't just me he'd betrayed. It was a fundamental defect in his character. The news, once it inevitably leaked and reached Amber, acted as the final, brutal catalyst for her. Sophia, ever vigilant, sent me screenshots of a frantic, tearful exchange between Amber and Gregory on a private messaging app, which one of her anonymous sources had conveniently forwarded. Amber's pleas turned to accusations, then to a cold, calculated fury. "You absolute bastard! Another one? All this time? I'm done, Gregory. You're a joke. A financially ruined, serial cheating joke." The message ended with a declaration. She was leaving Chicago, seeking a fresh start, presumably with a fresher, more lucrative mark. She was an opportunist, and even her time's loyalty, if it could ever be called that, evaporated with the last vestiges of Gregory's worth and, more importantly, with the revelation that she was just one pawn in his much larger sordid game. The sinking ship had lost its rats. The public reaction to this new layer of deceit was immediate and devastating. The number lights on Gregory movement, already a roaring fire, consumed this fresh revelation like dry tinder. Any lingering shred of sympathy Gregory might have desperately clung to was instantly incinerated. Social media exploded with renewed outrage. Articles that had previously offered measured critiques now openly condemned him. A pattern of deceit. Thorne's betrayal extends beyond his marriage. One headline blared, the carefully curated image he had fought so hard to maintain, the one he had tried to weaponize against me, shattered into a million irreparable pieces. He became a pariah. Not just professionally, but personally. His phone, once a constant companion, now rang with only my lawyer's calls, or the increasingly desperate calls from creditors. Former colleagues and supposed friends actively distanced themselves, their LinkedIn profiles swiftly scrubbed of any mention of their association with him. He was a man utterly alone, stripped bare of everything he valued. His attempts to salvage his reputation only exacerbated the situation, his public statements growing increasingly unhinged, blaming everyone from me to a vast conspiracy of jealous competitors. The desperation in his voice during a recorded interview, played to me by Catherine, was pathetic. He sounded broken, but not remorseful. He was angry that his carefully constructed illusions had been exposed, not for the pain he had inflicted. A strange mix of vindication and a chilling confirmation settled over me. It wasn't satisfaction, not entirely, to see a man's life disintegrate so spectacularly. There was no joy in witnessing his abject despair. Instead, it was a profound, cold certainty. Gregory wasn't just a flawed man who made a mistake. He was fundamentally, irredeemably deceitful. This additional mistress, this parallel existence, confirmed what my gut had silently screamed for years. Buried beneath the polite veneer of a successful marriage, he wasn't capable of true loyalty, not to me, not to Amber, not even to his own professed ambitions. He was a narcissist, a master manipulator. And seeing him finally exposed, isolated and scorned by everyone he had ever touched, brought a complex sense of closure. The truth, ugly and painful, had finally come full circle. Not just liberating me from his shadow, but revealing the true monstrosity of the man I once loved. The exposé of Eleanor Vance, coupled with Amber's frantic exit, had been the final definitive nail in Gregory's coffin of public opinion. Yet, one last pillar of his carefully constructed world remained, albeit tenuously. His family. His father, a man of old money and even older reputation, had always been Gregory's anchor, his most steadfast supporter, a figure of immense influence in Chicago's social and business circles. That anchor, too, was about to be severed. The news arrived not in a whisper, but in a headline that screamed from the digital pages of the Times Chicago Tribune *. Thorne patriarch disavows son amidst escalating scandal. The accompanying article detailed a terse, carefully worded statement released by Gregory Sr.'s PR team. It spoke of profound disappointment, of values not upheld, and unequivocally distanced the family's venerable name from Gregory Jr.'s regrettable personal and professional conduct. There was no softening, no plea for understanding, just a cold, decisive severance. It wasn't a suggestion, it was a public excommunication. I imagined Gregory's frantic calls, his desperate attempts to reason, to placate, to cling to the last shred of legitimate power he possessed. But his father, whose own legacy was now being stained, had made his choice. Reputation, for men like them, was paramount. This was the final, devastating blow. He had lost me, his wife, to his own deceit. He had lost Amber, his mistress, to his greater deceit and financial ruin. He had lost his career, his burgeoning empire, to his hubris and questionable ethics. And now, he had lost his family, the very foundation of his identity and perceived social standing. He was an island, adrift and completely alone, stripped bare of every single connection that had once defined him. The man who had walked so confidently through the glittering ballroom, believing himself invincible, was now utterly bankrupt in every sense of the word. Watching the complete collapse of his life unfold, I felt a strange, hollow ache. It wasn't triumph, not pure elation. It was the stark, chilling realization of consequences. This wasn't just vengeance. This was justice. Brutal and unforgiving, mirroring the brutality of his betrayal. He had made his choices, and now he was reaping the harvest, a bitter, solitary crop. The architect of his own destruction, he now stood amidst the ruins, a monument to his own hubris. The most delicate part of this unraveling was Mia. She was an intelligent, perceptive child, and while Sophia and I had shielded her from the uglier details, the changes were impossible to ignore. Gregory's absence from our lives, the move to Sophia's, the muted discussions she sometimes overheard, she was piecing things together. "Mommy, why isn't Daddy coming home anymore?" she asked one evening. Her voice small against the quiet hum of Sophia's apartment. I knelt, taking her tiny hands in mine. "Daddy made some choices, sweetie. Choices that weren't kind to Mommy, and not good for our family. Sometimes when people make bad choices, there are big consequences. I chose my words carefully, avoiding blame, focusing on the actions and their effects. He hurt me, Mia, and because of that, we can't be a family with him anymore. But you know what? Mommy is here, and Sophia is here, and we love you very, very much. You are safe, and you are loved, always." Her little brow furrowed, a miniature version of my own pensive look. "Did he make Grandma and Grandpa sad too?" she asked, a direct hit to the heart of the latest news. I hugged her tight. "Yes, sweetie. His choices made a lot of people sad, but that's about him, not about you. You are a wonderful, kind girl, and none of this is your fault." It was hard, explaining the brokenness of a father to his innocent daughter, but it was essential. She deserved the truth, protected by my honesty, not shrouded in more lies. She needed to understand that actions have consequences, and that her mother, though hurt, was strong enough to face them, and strong enough to protect her. The intimate, heart-wrenching conversations with Mia had prepared me, not for peace, but for the next, inevitable battlefield. The days of quiet strategy and whispered leaks were over. Now, the full force of Gregory's legal team clashed with mine within the hallowed, intimidating halls of justice. The divorce and asset division battle had officially escalated into an intense courtroom drama. A grand stage where every carefully constructed truth and every desperate lie would be laid bare. The fluorescent lights of the courtroom, harsh and unforgiving, illuminated Gregory's face, etched with a new kind of desperation. His once impeccable suits now seemed to hang on him, his eyes perpetually bloodshot. His legal counsel, a slick, aggressive bulldog of a man named Mr. Thorne, no relation, adopted tactics as erratic as Gregory's unraveling psyche. They attacked every aspect of my character, every financial claim, every piece of evidence, framing me as a vengeful, greedy ex-wife fabricating a narrative. They tried to paint my strategic financial moves as malicious, my disclosures as libelous. But their aggression felt hollow, a frantic attempt to create smoke where a fire already raged. I, however, remained a picture of serene composure, a stark contrast to Gregory's visible fraying. Catherine Davies, my attorney, was a maestro. Her presence radiated quiet authority, her arguments delivered with surgical precision, dissecting Gregory's flimsy defenses with calm, irrefutable logic. She anticipated their every move, her responses always measured, always devastating. Beside her I felt an almost invincible calm. Mia's safety and future were my shield, my unwavering anchor. My purpose transcended mere revenge. It was about reclaiming what was rightfully ours, about securing a future free from his toxicity. The testimonies began, each one a nail in Gregory's increasingly wobbly coffin. Our financial expert, a stern, bespectacled woman named Dr. Evelyn Reed, presented a meticulous breakdown of Thorne Innovations' plummeting valuation. With charts and figures, she exposed Gregory's gross mismanagement, his habit of inflating projected growth figures to lure investors, and subtle instances of siphoning company funds for personal expenses. Expenses that undoubtedly bankrolled Eleanor Vance's apartment, and Amber's extravagant gifts. Her testimony was clinically devastating, showcasing a pattern of financial impropriety that bordered on fraud. Next came Marcus, a former lead engineer from Thorne Innovations, a man Gregory had publicly fired for disloyalty. Marcus, his voice steady, detailed the toxic work environment, Gregory's increasing paranoia, and the unethical shortcuts he'd mandated to meet unrealistic targets. He prioritized perception over product, Marcus stated, looking directly at Gregory, and any dissent was met with threats. I witnessed him personally approve a project that he knew was fundamentally flawed, just to secure a short-term investor boost. The implication was clear. Gregory was willing to compromise his integrity and the company's future for personal gain and ego. As Marcus spoke, Gregory's control visibly snapped. "He's lying," Gregory roared, leaping from his seat, his face contorted in a mask of fury. "He's a disgruntled employee, a failure who couldn't keep up. Lorraine put him up to this." The judge, Honorable Eleanor Vance, a different one, I noted with a grim internal irony, rapped her gavel sharply. "Mr. Thorne, you are out of order. One more outburst, and I will hold you in contempt." Gregory's lawyer quickly pulled him back down, whispering urgently. But the damage was done. His desperation, his inability to control his temper, spoke volumes, undermining his carefully crafted victim narrative far more effectively than any counter-argument could. The subsequent testimonies followed a similar pattern. Former administrative staff recounted instances of Gregory using company resources for personal affairs. A real estate agent, with whom Gregory had been window shopping for a new penthouse for investment purposes, just months before the gala, subtly contradicted his claims of financial hardship. Each witness chipped away at his credibility, revealing the extent of his manipulation and deceit. By the end of the second week, the judge's demeanor was unmistakably clear. Her gaze, initially neutral, now often lingered on Gregory with a look of thinly veiled disapproval. Her questions to his legal team were sharp, probing, and laced with skepticism, while her reception of Catherine's arguments was attentive, and often followed by a nod of quiet understanding. The tide, I could feel it, had turned decisively in my favor. The courtroom, once a place of daunting uncertainty, now felt like a conduit for the justice I had quietly, meticulously orchestrated. The second act of this painful drama was drawing to a close, and Gregory was rapidly running out of moves. The weight that had pressed upon me for months, years even, began to lift not with the final gavel, but in the quiet moments between court sessions. As I watched Gregory's composure crumble under Catherine's relentless precision, it was in the judge's increasingly sharp gaze towards his defense, in the nervous whispers of his own legal team, that I felt the first true exhale. The suffocating burden of his deceit, of my perceived powerlessness, slowly dissolved, replaced by a nascent strength that pulsed in my veins. I was no longer merely surviving. I was thriving. Emerging from the crucible of betrayal forged anew, the woman who had meticulously packed a few boxes, trembling, was gone, replaced by someone who walked with purpose, her head held higher, her gaze steady and unwavering. Financial independence, once a distant dream overshadowed by Gregory's control, was no longer a question of if, but when. This newfound clarity wasn't just internal. It began to manifest in tangible ways. Old contacts, sensing the shift in the winds, started reaching out. One particular opportunity landed on my lap like a gift from the universe. A position as a project manager at a nascent nonprofit dedicated to supporting women re-entering the workforce after career breaks. My years of unofficial project management for Gregory, the meticulous organization I'd brought to his chaotic startup, suddenly had a value outside his shadow. I threw myself into it. My intelligence and resilience, once channeled into propping up his ego, now serving a cause I deeply believed in. I found a profound satisfaction in streamlining processes, in building partnerships, in empowering others, a stark contrast to the hollow ambition that had defined Gregory's world. Each successful grant application, each mentorship program launched, affirmed my capabilities in a way Gregory's dismissive praise never could. The greatest balm, however, was the deepening bond with Mia. The move to Sophia's, while initially unsettling for her, had ironically created an unparalleled closeness between us. Free from the underlying tension that had permeated our marital home, Mia blossomed. She still missed her father, in her innocent way, but the stable, loving environment we built, reinforced by Sophia's boundless affection, was a sanctuary. We spent evenings reading, cooking together, laughing without restraint. I was more present, more attuned to her needs. No longer distracted by the insidious anxieties Gregory's presence had wrought. Our conversations became more honest, age-appropriately explaining the complexities of family and integrity. She saw me not as a victim, but as a strong, capable mother navigating a challenging time with grace and determination. Her trust in me became absolute, a pure, unwavering beacon. Embracing this newfound freedom, I realized how much of my own growth I had deferred. With the legal battle steadily turning in my favor, and a sense of purpose anchoring my days, I enrolled in an online business analytics course. It was something I had always considered, but Gregory's subtle belittling of my academic pursuits had always dissuaded me. Now, the lectures filled a space that was once occupied by worry, and the complex data sets felt like a puzzle I was eager to solve. It was an investment in myself. A declaration that my intellect and ambitions were valid, independent of any man. I rediscovered the joy of learning, the thrill of mastering new skills, purely for my own fulfillment. Peace wasn't a sudden arrival, but a gentle dawn that crept into my life. It wasn't the absence of all pain. Scars remained, and some memories still pricked, but it was the absence of Gregory's shadow. I no longer woke with a knot of anxiety, no longer second-guessed my every decision. The constant performance, the careful curation of my life to fit his narrative, was over. I found fulfillment in the mundane. A quiet morning coffee, a walk in the park with Mia, a productive day at work. My independence wasn't just financial or legal, it was emotional, a profound sense of self-ownership. The anger had mellowed into a quiet understanding of his true nature, and the heartbreak had transformed into a fierce appreciation for my own resilience. I was whole again, perhaps for the first time, not despite the storm, but because I had weathered it. The final gavel strike didn't just echo through the silent courtroom, it reverberated through the very core of Gregory Thorne's existence, shattering the last vestiges of his carefully constructed reality. Judge Vance, her expression unyielding, delivered her judgment with a methodical cadence that felt both inevitable and absolute. Gregory, sitting rigidly beside his visibly deflated lawyer, watched as his world, piece by piece, was legally dismantled. The verdict was a categorical denouncement. He faced complete financial ruin, the judge ruling that his reckless mismanagement and outright fraud had irrevocably damaged Thorne Innovations, leading to its effective dissolution. The remaining assets, once the glittering promise of his empire, were now liquidated and divided, heavily weighted in my favor to compensate for years of marital contributions and his egregious misconduct. He was ordered to pay substantial alimony, a bitter irony for a man who had prided himself on his financial prowess, and comprehensive child support for Mia, ensuring her future was secure, untainted by his collapse. The marital home, once a symbol of our shared aspirations, was awarded to me outright, a silent testament to the years of sacrifice I had poured into it. His career, already a smoldering wreck, was now irrevocably destroyed. The name Gregory Thorne, once associated with innovation and success, was now synonymous with scandal, deceit, and moral bankruptcy. No longer would boardrooms welcome him. No investor would trust him. He was a pariah, his professional reputation in tatters. A cautionary tale whispered in the hallowed halls of Chicago's business elite. I last saw him amidst the chaotic aftermath of the ruling. His lawyer, looking utterly defeated, hurried away, leaving Gregory marooned at the defense table. He sat there, slumped, his expensive suit wrinkled, his once sharp features slack with an utter, desolate despair. The arrogant confidence that had defined him, the charisma that had once drawn me in, was utterly extinguished, replaced by a hollow void. He stared blankly at the polished mahogany table, perhaps seeing not the wood grain, but the bleak landscape of his own making, facing bankruptcy, stripped of his wealth, his family, his public standing, and now, even his dignity. He was a man consumed by the very hubris he had embodied, a stark lesson in the insidious nature of betrayal and the inevitability of its consequences. A profound sense of closure settled over me. Not a triumphant surge, but a quiet, steady peace. The scales of justice, so painstakingly balanced, had finally tipped. It wasn't about vengeance anymore. It was about the restoration of order, the reaffirmation that truth, though sometimes slow and painful, ultimately prevails. The anger had receded, leaving behind a clear understanding. The heartbreak had transformed into a sturdy foundation of self-worth. Gregory had been the architect of his own destruction, and I, Lorraine, had merely ensured that the edifice of his lies could no longer stand. My own future, once tethered to his, now stretched before me, vast and unburdened, a landscape of my own making, painted with the vibrant hues of freedom and hard-won peace. The vast, unburdened landscape of my future was not merely a blank canvas. It was a vibrant tapestry, rich with hues of freedom and hard-won peace, meticulously woven from the threads of resilience and self-discovery. The weight of Gregory's shadow, once a suffocating shroud, had finally lifted, allowing the sun to warm my face in a way it hadn't in years. This wasn't a quiet resignation. It was a soaring optimism, a certainty that the best chapters of my life were yet to be written. And this time, I held the pen. The lessons etched into my soul were profound and enduring. I had learned the brutal truth about betrayal, yes, but more importantly, I had discovered the boundless depths of my own strength. Self-worth, once a fragile concept easily swayed by external validation, was now an unshakable pillar within me. I understood that true resilience wasn't about avoiding pain, but about enduring it, transforming it, and emerging whole. And justice, I realized, wasn't just a legal outcome. It was the quiet, unwavering commitment to upholding one's truth, to fighting for what is right, not just for oneself, but for the principle of integrity. Gregory's downfall was a stark reminder that deceit, no matter how carefully constructed, eventually collapses under its own weight. My victory wasn't born of malice but of necessity, a powerful testament to the fact that silent sacrifice does not equate to weakness. My journey, though intensely personal, had inadvertently become a quiet beacon for others. Through my work at the nonprofit, I met countless women grappling with similar battles, their spirits bruised but not broken, sharing parts of my story, not as a lament, but as a narrative of reclamation. I saw a flicker of hope ignite in their eyes. It was a message that resonated beyond the courtroom, that one's worth is not dictated by a partner's fidelity or a society's expectations, but by an inner resolve to rebuild, to redefine, and to reclaim. My voice, once hesitant, now carried the quiet authority of experience, urging them to find their own unwritten futures. Mia, my sweet, perceptive Mia, blossomed in this new, tranquil environment. The laughter in Sophia's apartment, the genuine smiles, the consistent presence of a mother unburdened by hidden anxieties, these were the nourishing elements she needed. Our bond deepened, becoming an unbreakable tether of love and trust. We explored new parks, cooked new recipes, and dreamt new dreams, each moment a precious affirmation of our resilient, evolving family. Her questions about Gregory became less frequent, less tinged with sadness, replaced by a secure understanding that our happiness no longer depended on his presence. She saw me not as a wronged woman, but as a guiding light. Steadfast and true, my life now hummed with a purpose far beyond the boundaries of personal vindication. The business analytics course flourished, opening doors to new ventures, new challenges that excited my intellect. I found joy in the simple rhythm of my days. A productive morning, an afternoon walk with Mia, an evening spent with Sophia, sharing laughter and dreams. The scars of the past remained, subtle reminders of how far I had come, but they no longer dictated my path. They were simply part of the intricate tapestry of a life fully lived, fully embraced. The road ahead was unwritten, a canvas waiting for new colors, new adventures, and new contributions. This was not an ending, but a vibrant, expansive beginning, a continuous journey of growth, impact, and an ever-unfolding future of my own design.